Welcome to the Woodward Shoutouts Deep Dive podcast, where we dive deeper into the stories that shape our community at woodwardshoutouts.com. Today's episode is based on the article The Forgotten Murders That Shocked Main Street. We're going to explore one of the darkest chapters in Woodward's history, when a tragedy left the town stunned, and the consequences still ripple today.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are stepping back to September 1974. For many communities, the mid-70s represented a period of, well, relative calm, especially in places like Woodward. The sense of neighborly security was just paramount. This deep dive is really for you if you want to understand how a single devastating event didn't just cause grief, but fundamentally redefined, the town's concept of safety and memory.
Right. And what's fascinating here, perhaps chilling is a better word, is the sheer velocity with which that safety just evaporated. Woodward was, like you said, a place where everyone pretty much knew everyone. Crime often meant maybe petty theft, that sort of thing. The Thrasher family tragedy, however, was just brutal, deliberate, and completely baffling. It broke that unspoken contract of small-town life.
Yeah, it really did. And it's vital we pause to remember Mervin and Sandra. They were young, just in their late 20s, building a life. And their two small children, Penelope, only 5, and little Robert, 18 months old. The sheer totality of this crime, wiping out an entire young family, that's what created such a deep shockwave. And they were found tied up in their home. This wasn't chaotic. This felt controlled, planned, almost.
Exactly. And the details of the method are what truly distinguish this as, well, an execution. Not a simple crime of passion or opportunity. Every victim was shot in the head. But the violation went deeper, didn't it? The weapon used was the family's own .22 caliber rifle.
Their own gun.
Yeah. That detail speaks to an intense psychological takeover of the home. It's incredibly disturbing.
But the crucial defining piece of evidence, or maybe the lack of it, that immediately paralyzed the investigation in the community was, well, the motive, right? There wasn't one, clearly.
Precisely. We see this often in high-profile cases. When a crime is messy, investigators look for robbery, maybe jealousy, standard stuff. But here, the source material confirms there were no signs of forced entry, and critically, no signs of theft.
Nothing taken.
Nothing. Valuables, cash, jewelry, all remained untouched.
Okay, so in terms of criminal motive analysis, that immediately shifts the focus, doesn't it? This wasn't a robbery homicide gone wrong. This wasn't about money. The killer wasn't seeking material gain. They were specifically seeking the family.
That's the psychological terror that gripped Woodward. That realization. If the perpetrator wasn't a desperate thief, they were a targeted, cold-blooded killer, operating amongst them without any discernible economic reason. This just escalated the fear from, a random distant threat to an immediate personal danger that couldn't be easily explained away.
The fear must have been palpable. I mean, how do you return to normal when you know someone who acted with such controlled malice might still be walking your streets?
You don't, really.
Yeah.
Not easily. It creates immense pressure on law enforcement, which brings us to the next chapter. Eventually, a local man named Billy Wayne Collins was convicted for the murders. The town finally had a name, a resolution, seemingly.
But here's where the narrative of closure gets thorny, as it often does. In cases like this, conviction is supposed to seal the wound, right? But this conviction, it left a lingering scar of doubt for some.
Absolutely. Even after the official court finding, Collins himself consistently maintained that another individual was involved in the tragedy. Now, you have to consider, of course, that this could simply be a legal strategy trying to muddy the waters, deflect blame.
Sure.
But the persistence of the claim, combined with the extreme brutality and that lingering lack of a clear motive, well, it gave local citizens pause. They wondered.
Wait, so if the initial motive was so unclear and the act itself seemed so premeditated, how credible was Collins' claim of an accomplice? Was there perhaps an element of urgency? Maybe police pressure to close a case that was just terrifying the entire region?
That's the important question, isn't it? And the source material suggests the legal resolution didn't translate into full peace of mind for everyone. For some, the official story felt, well, incomplete. It didn't fully explain the depth of the violence or the meticulousness required to wipe out an entire family without leaving behind obvious evidence of external motives. The fear that a second person, an accomplice, was never caught, never identified, that prevented that complete release, that sense of closure.
That lingering doubt. It points us directly toward a document that, quite surprisingly, never saw the light of a courtroom floor. This is where we found that critical, unpublicized piece of history, and this section is specifically for you, the listener, if you're eager for the full picture.
We're talking about an account given by one of the very first officers on the scene. Years, decades, even after the crime and Collins's conviction, this officer wrote a private, unpublished letter detailing what he saw that day. The existence of this letter itself highlights an enormous potential conflict. Maintain the official narrative for community stability or expose possible inconsistencies.
And what he confessed in this letter, it challenges the official timeline completely. It wasn't about a missed shell casing or an overlooked fingerprint, nothing like that. He confessed to seeing a specific, haunting detail at the crime scene, something that fundamentally did not match the official evidence presented at trial.
Exactly. The detail itself wasn't directly related to the act of murder, but rather the condition of the house afterwards. The officer's core claim was that this specific piece of staging, let's call it an object or situation that was unnaturally arranged, it made him believe that someone had returned to the house after the murders had already occurred.
Return to the scene. Wow, okay, that suggests something far more complex than a lone killer acting impulsively. It implies meticulousness, planning, maybe even covering tracks. It suggests either a cleanup, maybe the removal of a specific piece of linking evidence, or, terrifyingly, the conscious staging of the scene to mislead investigators.
Right. If the conviction focused solely on a single killer, this undisclosed detail hints at secondary involvement. Perhaps by the person who returned to ensure the crime scene was sterile, or maybe even to frame the narrative, point fingers elsewhere. The officer later refused all interviews on the matter, which is telling.
Why do you think?
Well, it suggests the weight of the secret, perhaps, or maybe fear of departmental retaliation for contradicting the official closed case. Who knows? But it remains this deeply chilling footnote. The possibility that the full, true timeline of events might still be deliberately unknown.
And if we connect this disturbing hidden truth back to the bigger picture, you start to understand why the town's response was so absolute, so unified. While the Thrasher home wasn't located directly on Main Street, the devastation and the trauma just start. It permeated every corner of Woodward. The community knew instinctively that this act meant their safe world, the one they thought they lived in, was gone forever.
Yeah. And Main Street, being the commercial and social heart of Woodward, didn't just mourn. It became the stage for collective grief, and eventually for resolve. The source material really highlights the immediate physical reaction of the business community there.
What strikes me is how immediate and unified that reaction was. Businesses displayed black ribbons, and this isn't a small gesture, is it? This signifies that the economy, the daily rhythm of life, actually paused out of respect.
It does.
The community gatherings were organized almost immediately to honor the memory of the 4 family members lost. This rapid, shared sorrow, that was a first step toward collective healing, you could say.
And this collective mourning, it became the seed of long-term resilience. Woodward didn't let the horror paralyze them indefinitely. In the decades since, the community has worked diligently, consciously, to channel that painful memory into productive purpose.
And we can trace that purpose directly through specific organizations, can't we? The source highlights collaborations between Woodward Tourism, Woodward Main Street, and organizations like Circle of Care, Inc. These aren't just generic civic groups operating in silos. Their efforts specifically leverage the memory of that shared communal vulnerability.
That's the key analysis here, I think. The Thrasher tragedy starkly highlighted the failure of traditional small-town safety nets when confronted with an extreme internal crisis like this. This drove efforts to not only foster unity through, successful fundraisers and gatherings, but also to specifically strengthen community infrastructure against future domestic crises, support systems. The collaboration between these groups wasn't about forgetting the past, not at all. It was about using it as a blueprint, almost, to build a stronger present.
So what does this all mean for Woodward today? The community didn't sweep this dark history under the rug, that's clear. Instead, they seem to have built their renewal right on top of that painful memory. The article concludes that Main Street, once overshadowed by this immense sorrow and, frankly, the lingering doubt about the full truth, now stands as a powerful symbol. A symbol of renewal and hope. It really is a testament to Woodward's enduring spirit, despite its dark history.
Definitely. So we've explored the initial shock of 1974, the specific horror of the crime method, the persistent legal questions raised by Collins's claims, that fascinating and deeply disturbing undisclosed detail from the first officer suggesting a potential cleanup or staging, and ultimately the town's ability to channel that painful memory into tangible community purpose and resilience. It's quite a journey.
It really is. And in remembering what happened on Main Street, we honor not only what was lost, but who we became. Thank you for listening to the Woodward Shoutouts Deep Dive podcast. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want to stay connected with the stories that matter in our hometown, be sure to subscribe at woodwardshoutouts.com. You'll receive our weekly newsletter filled with more deep dives into Woodward's past, present, and future.